Good morning, students. Today, we are in chapter 6, and we are going to look at the Jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio and the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate. And we look at Sokoto Caliphate as an outcome of the political revolution which started in the first decade of the 19th century. This important development was as a result of the conditions which obtained in Hausaland in the 18th century. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what were these conditions that were in Hausaland that led to the revolution or the Jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio? These are some of the things we will consider in this chapter. But before we do that, we are now going to look at the objective. And we say that at the end of this chapter, our students should be able to, one, examine the causes and consequences of the jihad, determine the factors that led to the rise of the caliphate, examine the administrative sector of the caliphate and its relations with neighbors, trace the internal and external factors that led to the establishment of the caliphate. The next thing we are going to consider now is the Hausa society before the establishment of the caliphate. How was the Hausa society organized? We have to point out now that there was nothing like empire among the Hausa states. All they had was kingdom, and most of them, though related, did not live harmoniously. And it was because of this that enabled Uthman Dan Fodio in 1804 to 1808 to overrun most of the kingdoms in Hausa land. We were talking about the disharmony that existed among the Hausa kingdoms. We look at it here that the state of Gobi emerged as the dominant state in Hausa land and terrorized other states. Its military activities led to the collapse and destruction of Kebbi in the 1720s. By 1750s, Gobi's hostility against the kingdom of Zamfara led to the destruction and break-up of its central government. This destruction continued. This war and this mistrust and distrust among the kingdoms of the Hausa land continued till the opening year of the 19th century. The level of this dissatisfaction in Hausa land reached a breaking point. All that was needed was an effective leader who will serve as a rallying point and transform the dissatisfaction into an open revolt. This was found in the person of Uthman Dan Fodio. He provided justification for revolt against oppression and injustice. Now, we are now going to look at the man Uthman Dan Fodio. Who is Uthman Dan Fodio that changed the course of events in the entire Hausa land between 1804 to 1808, or we can say at the opening of the 19th century? Who is this Uthman Dan Fodio? His full Arabic name was Uthman bin Muhammad bin Uthman bin Salim. The appended name Fodio being the Hausa version of the Fulani name Fudi, which means a learned man. He and his brother Abdullah had Islamic education at Agadez in Niger Republic. Uthman Dan Fodio was extraordinarily well read in Arabic literature, a master of the classical tongue which he had learned in his youth. He possessed a vast fund of Quranic knowledge and was in addition particularly well informed. in traditions, laws, and rhetorics. He had also studied classical Islamic history. All this enabled him to understand the essence of Islam, embodying the totality of human life that was not just confined to rituals. His writings on diverse subjects showed this. He had a clear vision of an ideal Islamic society. At the age of 20, Uthman returned to Hausaland and began a career of preaching and teaching. As an itinerant preacher, he operated in Kebbi, Gobi, and Zamfara and attracted a lot of admirers. In his preachings, Uthman condemned the government, which he said was unjust and corrupt, expressed disgust over the mixing of Islam with traditional religious practices, and demanded from all people a complete acceptance of Islam with all its spiritual and moral values. Uthman Dan Fodio's preachings and tremendous response he got from people in Gobi, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, brought him into contact with Bawo Jangwazo, the king of Gobi. Bawo was a nominal Muslim. He allowed the practice of traditional religious rites among his subjects. He was alarmed by the success of Dan Fodio's preachings and felt that the growth of the Islamic group in his kingdom was a threat to his authority. He therefore invited Sheikh and his followers for a feast with an intention to massacre them, but their large number overwhelmed him, so he dropped the devilish plan and rather struck a compromise with him. Shehu seized the opportunity not only to urge the king to rule justly, but also to release from prison Abashi, the king of Zamfara, and other people he imprisoned after overrunning the Zamfara country. He also requested Bawa to grant Muslims freedom of religious worship and the right to wear the turban. All these concessions were granted. The apparently friendly relation between Shehu and Bawa came to an end at the latter's death, after which his son Nafata succeeded him. Nafata felt threatened by the growing numerical strength of Shehu's followers, and so withdrew all the privileges granted Shehu and his followers by Bawa. Henceforth, he declared, all new converts to Islam were asked to return to their former traditional religion. No son will be converted to another religion different from his father's, and the wearing of both the turban by men and the veil by women was banned. Nafata took these measures because the growth of Islam in his kingdom was threatening his position as a ruler. This is because conversion to Islam involved the shifting of allegiance from the ruler to the head of the Islamic community, therefore reducing the king's authority while the power of Shehu increased. However, all the above restrictions placed on the Muslims by Nafata not only strained his relationship with Shehu, but also provoked Shehu's followers to militant actions later. After the death of Nafata, his son Yumfa succeeded him in about 1802. Yumfa, who was a former pupil of the Shehu at the Girl, was not compromising as the earlier kings in the activities of Muslim followers of the Shehu in Gobi. He realized the danger facing him in the kingdom as a result of the activities of this group and became hostile to them. Matters came to a head when Dan Fodio met a party of war prisoners, among whom were some of his followers being led off into slavery, and he set free the Muslim followers. Yumfa made this challenge with an attempt at assassinating the Sheikh, who appeared to have got wind of what was about to happen and moved out of the Girl to Gudu with his followers and members of his family before Yumfa struck. This flight by Dan Fodio on February 21st, 1804 had since been regarded as his hijrah in the manner of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Agudu, the followers of Dan Fodio, which included the Fulani, the Hausa, and the Tuareg, both Muslims and traditional religionists alike, began to gather around him. Dan Fodio's followers conferred on him the title of Amira Mumini, that is the commander of the faithful. He then declared a jihad on the unbelievers in Gobi. Although the attempt by Yunfa on Uthman Dan Fodio's life and Dan Fodio's response to it caused the outbreak of the jihad, this was just an immediate cause and not the only cause. The outbreak was preceded by a long period of accumulated grievances and misforgivings which the Fulani had against their Hausa landlord, especially the rulers. Thus, apart from the immediate cause of the Holy War, there were several remote causes which developed out of the grievances. The Fulani were merely waiting for an opportunity with which to confront the Hausa rulers to seek redress for the grievances. This opportunity was provided by Yunfa's attack on Dan Fodio. Having looked at some of the terms that caused the remote and the immediate cause of the jihad, we are now going to look at or itemize the things that actually led to the jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio. Some of them were immediate, some of them were remote, and we are going to start with the number one, the causes or factors that motivated Uthman into declaring war on the Hausaland. And the first one, we say that the first motivation, what actually made Uthman Dan Fodio to declare war on the Hausa kings, was the success of the jihad in Futatoro, Futabundu, and Futajalo area of the Senegal in the 18th century, acted as an inspiration to Dan Fodio and his followers to carry out a jihad in Hausaland. Fodio reasoned that if his fellow Fulani clerics successfully carried out their jihad to purify Islam in the decadent Islamic societies of the Futas, he could reform his Islam in the equally decadent Islamic situation in Hausaland through jihad. 2. The primary aim of the Fulani jihadists was to establish orthodox Islamic practice in Hausaland. The Fulani clerics were saddened by the fact that the Hausa rulers, who were nominal Muslims, mixed Islam with traditional religious practices in order to gain the loyalty of all their subjects. The clerics therefore felt that a jihad was inevitable in order to restore Islam in its original pure status. The success of the Fulani was lack of unity among the Hausa kings, who were in the habit of quarreling and warring one against the other. Gobi was at war with Katsina in the 1750s, while Zamfara and Kano fought for supremacy in the 1760s. The feeling of animosity and jealousy which these wars engendered between states made it difficult for them to cooperate and combine effectively to resist the Fulani menace. It was this lack of unity rather than military weakness of the Hausa state that was responsible for the Fulani victory. Uthman Dan Fodio and his Fulani followers adopted the strategy of isolating the various Hausa states and conquering them one after the other. Uthman did this by appointing flag bearers whom he instructed to carry out the jihad in their respective areas. As a result, most of the Hausa states were engaged in the jihad almost at the same time, and this made combined action against the Fulani jihadists difficult. The fifth point, by commanding each flag bearer to make himself emir in his territory in the event of a successful jihad, Uthman provided strong incentive for the successful prosecution of the war. There is no doubt that the quest for power became a powerful motive force among the leaders of the jihad. The point number 6, the Fulani had a feeling of superiority over their Hausa landlords. Because of their education and greater worldly exposure, the Fulani Muslims felt superior to the Hausa and found it difficult to obey nominal Muslim rulers or those rulers who worshipped traditional gods. 7. The Fulani armies were better organized militarily than most of the Hausa communities or states. This was because in the course of their migration, they were often exposed to frequent attacks by local Hausa kings and the Tuaregs. Naturally, they organized their encampments on defensive bases with strong and well-equipped militia to defend men and cattle in times of attack. Closely connected with the Fulani military superiority is the organizing ability of the leaders of the jihad. Uthman, his son Muhammad Bello, and his brother Abdullahi, they credit for the strategy of isolating the Hausa state and thus preventing their combined action go to Uthman himself, but the credit for the actual prosecution of the war on the battlefield goes to Muhammad Bello and Abdullahi. Uthman Dan Fodio's criticism of the entire Hausa society and the ruling classes helped to win him followers and prepare the ground for his jihad. He severely criticized the Malams for supporting the oppressive government of the Sultans. As a result, thousands of people gathered around to hear him and support him in whatever actions he would take to make the society better. Point number 10. The Fulani felt that because they were oppressed in Hausaland, they could seize power and establish a just government. So the jihad in Hausaland was a tribal war in seizing power in order to set up a government favorable to all Fulanis. The withdrawal by Sultan Nafata of the privileges earlier granted Muslims in Gobi highly annoyed the Muslims. The Muslims were provoked by this action, which had robbed them of the distinct identity they enjoyed in Gobi, and so determined to defend these privileges, which they had come to take as their rights. The attempt made by Yunfa on the life of Dan Fodio was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Fodio's response to this attack brought about the outbreak of the jihad. It can therefore be said that military, social, intellectual, and religious factors combined to make the Fulani jihad possible and successful. Now we look at the administration of the Sokoto Caliphate. As we noted earlier, the acknowledgement of Uthman Dan Fodio as the Amiral Mumini in 1804 marked the beginning of the Sokoto Caliphate, and the jihad which started as a revolt against the Hausa leaders of Gobi, but later spread to other parts of Hausaland and even beyond. From 1805 onwards, leaders of the Muslim communities outside Gobi came to Uthman Dan Fodio, who gave flags to them as the symbol of his authority, charging them to wage the jihad in their various areas. With this, the scattered Muslim communities were brought under one central authority. The stage marked the full establishment of the Caliphate. In its strict sense, the Caliphate is in Islam a centralized or unitary political sector under the leadership of a caliph appointed by the entire Muslim community. But the caliph could appoint officials to govern the provinces on his behalf as laid down by the Islamic law. In its early stages, the authority of the caliph was derived from the influence and charisma of Uthman Dan Fodio. However, in 1812, the direct administration of the caliphate was divided between Muhammad Bello, Dan Fodio's son, and Abdullahi, Dan Fodio's brother. Bello was given the Eastern Emirate with Sokoto as his headquarters, while Abdullahi was assigned the Western Emirate with Banjul as his base. Even though Fodio now devoted his time to teaching and writing, his authority was real and final in the Caliphate. The local commanders who had earlier received flags from Dan Fodio were also authorized to establish Muslim governments in their areas once they had gained control of such areas. However, each emirate was largely autonomous, and apart from giving general guidance, the Caliph did not interfere with the day-to-day administration of the emirs. It was, of course, the duty of the Caliph to settle disputes within and between the emirates. In administering the emirates, the emir were assisted by the number of officials. The most important offices were the waziri, the equivalent of a prime minister or chief secretary, madawaki or saken yakin, commander of the army, alkali or kedi, the chief judge, and ajia, treasurer. It was the well-ordered and highly functional system of government that the British utilized when they introduced their system of indirect rule in this part of Nigerian area. Now, before we end today's lecture, we are going to look at the impact of jihad. The jihad brought about many important changes, which had both long and short-term effects on the history of a large part of the Nigerian area. These changes include: 1. The first and immediate impact relates to political changes. The jihad resulted in the collapse of the Hausa state and communities. These were incorporated into a single political unit known as the Sokoto Caliphate. 2. It also led to the collapse of the over 1,000 years Sarafiwa dynasty and the emergence of a new dynasty, the El Kanami dynasty in Borno. The last point we have to consider before we end today's lecture is the wars. The wars led to the dislocation and displacement of the population and the sedentarization of the Fulani and other nomadic groups. We will end chapter 6 today, which had the topic, the Jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio and the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate. Next week, when we will be having chapter 7, we will deal with the topic, Nigeria and the Atlantic slave trade. Thank you so much.